My journey of revenge began when I discovered my wife's affair. Let's refer to her as Carrie. After 14 years of marriage and 3 children, my life took an irreversible turn when I glimpsed an explicit text on her work phone for a brief moment. This message had no place on a work phone. It appeared on the lock screen, revealing the sender's name. We'll call him Perry. Some background. I married Carrie when I was 25, and she was 22. I was a high school teacher then, while she worked as a registered nurse. Following the birth of our first child, Carrie became a stay-at-home mom. Money was tight, so I took on an administrative role within my department and coached 2 sports for extra income. We managed, and with annual salary increases, I eventually stopped coaching and pursued an administrative credential through a program. After I transitioned into administration, our youngest child was ready for preschool, and Carrie decided to return to work. While nursing jobs are usually available, the best positions aren't always easy to come by. Carrie had to start from the beginning, working alongside much younger nurses who could handle back-to-back double shifts that took a toll on her. When she inquired about other positions with her supervisor, she was informed that without a bachelor's degree, at that time she only had a 2-year ADN, advancement wasn't possible. I assured her that with our youngest in preschool, after-school recreation, and my retired mother, who was always willing to pick up and watch the kids, I'd support her pursuit of a BSN. It took her 3 years, but she eventually earned her BS and was promoted to a better role at the hospital. Things were going well. Our finances were in good shape, and we finally moved into a bigger home, bought new cars, and more. My career shift from school administration to district administration gave me more time to spend with Carrie and the kids. Her schedule became more predictable, and even though I often had long work hours, this change allowed us to fulfill our dream of traveling to the places we'd listed during our honeymoon. She kept that list in our wedding album. Years later, I noticed that she carried 2 phones. When I asked about it, she explained that the hospital provided one of them. I didn't question her because my district also offered a phone or phone stipend. I chose the stipend. More months went by, and I believed we were a content-perfect family. I charged my phone in our den, and she charged her phones in our guest bedroom, which also served as a computer room where we could monitor the kids while they were online. I was updating computer software when I noticed a light on her work phone. She usually placed her phones face down while charging. Out of curiosity, I reached over and turned the phone face up. A message had appeared on the lock screen, asking her when she'd like to get a BJ again, but using much more explicit language. The sender was Perry. Everything around me seemed to come to a halt. I was frozen. My initial thought was, what on earth is this? It's her work phone. A message like that could get her fired. Then the realization hit me. Was Carrie involved in an affair? It's fascinating how the mind functions. Suddenly, I started recalling various things Carrie had done that seemed strange. I had either brushed them off or accepted her explanations right away. She frequently left the room to answer calls or respond to texts, claiming that it would breach patient confidentiality if I overheard her discussing a patient. I accepted this because education has similar privacy regulations involving students. Sometimes she'd return home with a faint cologne scent on her clothes, attributing it to assisting male patients with moving. I took her explanation at face value, but I always found it curious that the cologne scent seemed consistent. Once the door of awareness was opened, I began to notice many things I had overlooked. Our intimacy in the bedroom had significantly declined, partly due to her having to leave the house at odd hours to cover for other nurses who called in sick. I also remembered where I had come across the name Perry before, and after confirming with the hospital, I learned he was a doctor there. For about a week, I was in a daze, trying to piece everything together. One of our kids had left a book in Carrie's car, providing an excuse for me to visit the hospital, since Carrie had mentioned that personal visits weren't encouraged. While my child fetched Carrie's car key, pretending I'd left mine at home, I chatted with a nurse in the lobby and joked about how work phones might seem convenient but actually kept you on call 24/7. This led to her sharing that the hospital was stingy when it came to providing cell phones to nurses. Only high-ranking executives received them, which didn't include Carrie. With most of my suspicions confirmed, I took a day off to consult a divorce lawyer. The news I received was disheartening. We resided in a community property state with a no-fault divorce policy. Despite making more money than Carrie, her role as the primary caretaker of the kids, and our marriage of over 10 years, the outcome of filing for divorce looked grim. I'd potentially lose the house, pay alimony, she'd take a significant portion of my retirement savings, and I'd be responsible for child support for years, unless joint custody was granted. The most devastating part was that her infidelity didn't matter. It simply didn't matter. This realization left me devastated. I had only one person I could confide in about this matter. She was a fellow teacher who had also transitioned into administration, although she was stuck at a school site. Let's call her Anne. Anne had been married at 19, but her marriage was annulled when her husband got another woman pregnant. Following that, she focused on her career, and we discovered we shared many viewpoints when it came to K-12 education. I spoke with Anne, and something she said completely shifted my perspective. If you're unhappy with the hand you've been dealt, change the deck. I realized I had two challenges. I earned more money than Carrie, and she had more time to dedicate to caring for the kids. Dealing with the second issue was relatively straightforward. In every district office, there are positions that offer a fast track to higher roles, as well as jobs that administrators endure, similar to less desirable military tasks. One of these dead-end regulatory roles had become available again. Ambitious administrators tend to leave after a couple of years when better positions open up. I had a conversation with our district superintendent and inquired about being transferred to that position. His initial reaction was surprise, but I explained that it was my turn to make a sacrifice for the team, and that it would contribute to filling a gap in my administrative experience. He agreed to the move. The job mainly involved number crunching without any interaction with staff or students, allowing me to set my own schedule and even work from home using a laptop. This newfound free time allowed me to take the kids to school, pick them up afterward, instead of using after-school recreation or having my mother watch them, and be with them at home. I assisted with their homework, cooked dinner, and more. While my ultimate goal was to become their primary caregiver, I can't express how much I genuinely enjoyed playing a more active role in their daily lives. Although my salary remained unchanged, I needed to find a way for Carrie to significantly increase her income from her current nursing position. I recalled Carrie's frustration when a supervisor mentioned that, in the future, bachelor degrees will be worthless, and everyone will need at least a master's degree. Her hard work in obtaining her BS felt belittled by that comment. I persuaded her to consider starting an MSN program. I assured her that due to my much more flexible work schedule, I could continue caring for the kids. Initially hesitant, I then proposed, "You could have every evening free to study or attend classes, whatever you want." Her eyes lit up instantly, likely thinking about the possibility of spending more time with Perry. To ensure she was truly making progress in her MSN program, I directly covered her tuition and fees at her university. It was anticipated to take her anywhere from 2 to 3 years to complete. Those years brought challenges at times. I could sense whenever she hurried off to meet Perry or returned from seeing him. There was a certain excitement or satisfaction in her eyes that wasn't present when she focused on her coursework. I had to either offer a smile or act like I hadn't noticed. There were moments when my patience wore thin, leading to arguments over trivial matters. A few times I nearly jeopardized the entire facade, having to control my anger and apologize instead of hurling insults at her, which she perhaps deserved. Throughout this period, Anne remained my trusted confidant. I had recommended her for the previous fast-track role I held, and she joined me at the district office. Anne possessed qualifications, diligence, ambition, and only required an opportunity to impress the higher-ups. After she impressed everyone, I even received praise for recommending her. Anne and I initiated our own affair. It wasn't a fiery, passionate romance, but rather two friends fulfilling each other's needs. Anne played an essential role. Without her, I wouldn't have been able to sustain the illusion of being the oblivious simp. So when Carrie returned home with a smile after spending time with Perry, I managed to bear it and even returned the smile because I had my own lover. After 3.5 years, Carrie finished her MSN degree and earned a promotion at her hospital. Her salary saw a substantial increase, surpassing mine. When we celebrated her achievement with a congratulations dinner, I made a lighthearted remark about her becoming the family's breadwinner. She chuckled and playfully suggested that I should become a stay-at-home dad now. About a month later, I returned to the lawyer, who initially didn't recognize me, and informed her of the significant financial changes. Armed with this updated information, she prepared the divorce petition and filed it. When the kids were with my mother, I arranged for Carrie to be served. The deputy knocked on our front door and I pointed her out. After confirming her identity, the deputy handed her a copy of the divorce petition. With the deputy as a witness, I confronted Carrie about her affair with Perry, without revealing how long I had been aware. I told her to go and find happiness with her doctor lover. She reacted by yelling at me, attempting to lie, and eventually rushing towards me. The deputy intervened, warning her that women could face legal consequences for domestic issues now. He advised her to pack a bag and stay somewhere else. Carrie left after I promised not to reveal her affair to the kids. Although I didn't directly tell the kids, I confided in my mother, who then shared the news with my sister. It gradually spread to my sister's kids and their cousins, my children. After a few days, the kids eventually learned that their dad was divorcing their mom because she had a boyfriend. Eventually, the court finalized the divorce, granting me primary custody of our children since I had been their main caregiver. I retained the house with the agreement that I would refinance it to buy out Carrie's share. She was ordered to pay child support, which I utilized as leverage to negotiate her relinquishing any claims to my retirement savings if I bought her out. Taking advantage of the era when banks readily provided mortgages and refinancing, I successfully refinanced my house. With some financial assistance from my parents, I purchased Carrie's share in both the home and my retirement savings. The day she signed all the legal documents with my lawyer to sever any potential financial ties was a moment of immense happiness for me. It felt like I could finally breathe again. I celebrated this milestone with Anne, who had been my unwavering support throughout. I don't hesitate to admit that I found solace in her arms during the challenging times. Anne and I eventually married. As she earned a promotion to a higher role, I was persuaded to reclaim my former district position when my youngest child entered high school. Carrie and I maintained a good relationship after the divorce. We attended family therapy with the kids and figured out how to co-parent effectively. During the initial months, the kids questioned her about why she needed a boyfriend when their dad had been there all along. With the children and the therapist addressing this, I didn't need to say a word. Due to her legitimately demanding work schedule, Carrie missed out on spending time with the kids, which made me feel sorry that they weren't getting enough time with their mother. So I encouraged them to maintain contact with her through phone calls instead. When Carrie learned about my proposal to Anne, she offered her congratulations. I reassured her that it wouldn't be a problem for her to marry Perry if she wanted to. However, her mood turned somber. She shared that Perry had started seeing another woman, a younger nurse from the hospital. Her new position left her with little time for him, and when they did meet, she couldn't be as fun as before. It was an odd situation to witness. My ex-wife, the one who had cheated on me and caused our marriage to crumble, seeking sympathy from me. Yet I couldn't find any compassion to offer. What I did have were years filled with resentment and frustration. I carried the weight of knowing another man was involved with my wife. The stress had caused me to lose weight and experience hypertension, leading me to confide in my doctor about the true cause. Even my dentist noticed the impact, warning me about teeth grinding and the potential need for dental implants. There were instances when I had to maintain intimacy with Carrie to uphold the charade, thankfully infrequently. I'd make excuses about using rubbers, claiming it was to rekindle memories of our early relationship, or due to a possible bladder infection. I'd then take an STD test anyway, waiting for the results before being with Anne again. However, when all was said and done, the sacrifices seemed worthwhile. While Carrie received a substantial payout when I bought out her share of the house in retirement, she gradually returned the money through child support payments. She suffered even greater losses in the process. Her time with our kids was limited to every other weekend and a couple of holidays. Perry ended their relationship, and his own circumstances weren't impressive. being divorced twice, having 5 kids, and dealing with alimony and child support payments. On the other hand, I managed to maintain custody of my kids, my house, my income, my retirement, and even gained Anne's companionship. I'm genuinely content with my life. All of this unfolding within a community property state with no-fault divorce laws. If this doesn't classify as a form of pro-revenge, I'm not sure what would. I am 42 years old, a woman who cheated on my husband. 42 years old, 3 years ago, and it shattered my family. I carry regret for my actions every single day. My husband and I began our relationship at 19. We weren't each other's firsts, and for 22 years I believed we were content. He occasionally lets his temper get the best of him, but he's the type of person who wears his emotions openly. He can handle a lot, and when he gets angry, he vents out everything that's been bothering him. I can relate because I do the same, and sometimes I end up saying hurtful things in the heat of the moment. Surprisingly, he never held it against me. Our intimate life used to be great. He wanted more, and he tried every day, but being a stay-at-home mom to 5 kids, 3 girls and 2 boys, left me exhausted. He expressed his dissatisfaction when we didn't have closeness, and I found it frustrating. Looking back, we could have been more intimate more frequently. However, he does pitch in around the house. Despite working 60 hours a week, he ensures I get to sleep in on weekends, and I wake up to a tidy home and breakfast. Over the years, as time passed and the oldest 3 kids started going to college, I began to feel the empty nest syndrome. I felt bored and a little restless. I still had my 2 boys who were in junior high, but they didn't really need me. My husband noticed this and encouraged me to find a job. Looking back, I should have declined his suggestion. I should have found a hobby or made different choices. My husband is a bit on the heavy side, but handsome. As for me, my weight fluctuated between 150 and 210 pounds depending on the year. When I got a job as a customer service representative, I weighed 160 pounds and felt good. It had been 21 years since I had worked, and returning to work was a positive experience. As the months went on, I started spending time with younger coworkers in their 20s. My husband encouraged this because I lacked female friends. I used to encourage him to spend time with his coworkers, so I thought it was fair to do the same. These coworkers influenced my thoughts. They made me believe I could do better, that my husband wasn't attractive enough, and that I was being held back. Even a male coworker of mine said that my husband was acting tough but wasn't truly assertive, and I believed it. Back then, I thought my husband talked a big game but wouldn't follow through. I had seen him argue with people who talked back, but I had never seen him get into a physical fight. I don't know where that idea came from. I loved him and respected him, and he did the same for me. Our friends always told me how fortunate I was to have him, and I did feel lucky. However, somehow, their opinions started affecting my feelings for him. This little push kept happening whenever my coworkers and I chatted, and eventually, I started flirting with the same male coworker who called my husband a beta. He was my age, good-looking, in good shape, and as the weeks went by, things escalated. He initiated the first move, and I just went along with it. We were having sex whenever we could. I felt younger and attractive, but I treated my husband poorly. I refused him sexually, made fun of his weight, and even tried to make him doubt our relationship by making him think he was crazy. Looking back, I'm not sure why I was acting that way. I don't recognize that person in my behavior. I understood how bad things were when my husband crushed a glass with his bare hands, giving me a hateful look during dinner. "You have a hickey," he said angrily as he wrapped his injured hand and left for urgent care. My sons were shocked by the scene. The oldest one's eyes turned red, and he quickly left the room. I called my lover and shouted at him, and he admitted he gave me a hickey to mark his territory. I felt disgusted, and it was the first time I felt truly sorry for what I had done. It was past midnight when he arrived home, looked directly into my eyes, and asked, "How long?" I wanted to deny it, to say no, but his expression gave it away. So I admitted, 4 months. "Did you perform BJ on him?" I remained silent. He circled around me, paused by my ear, and said in a hushed tone I could hear, "I want a divorce, you cheating witch." I was so furious that he used that language. He had never spoken to me like that before, and all I could do was cry, especially when I noticed our sons watching me from the bottom of the stairs. They stared at me with such anger, and I was upset with him for doing this in front of them. I should have directed that anger towards myself. I should have felt disgusted with myself, but I had these blinders on, and my husband immediately disconnected. It was like a switch had been flipped, and just like that, his love for me vanished. My female co-workers stood by my side, convincing me that I was making the right decision, and I believed them. They said I could spend more time with my lover, and I bought into their advice. I didn't want a period of separation, but my husband moved out of our house and into an apartment that was only a half-mile away. My sons were treating me poorly, and my daughters were refusing to talk to me. Despite my objections, my lover started coming over to the house. This made my children furious, and he refused to leave the first time my soon-to-be ex, St. Beck's husband, came to pick up the boys. My lover was in better physical shape than my STBX, but my STBX just smiled at him and said, "Not yet." He added, "Not yet, but soon." After they left, I was very upset with my lover. I told him that his behavior was unacceptable, but he ignored me. Eventually, he yelled at me when he'd had enough, which scared me. My lover then began telling me what to eat, what to wear, and making hurtful comments when no one else was around, and I allowed it. When the divorce was finalized, we agreed on a 50-50 split, and I arranged a payment plan to buy his half of the house. We had joint custody, but the boys chose to live with him. I haven't seen my older daughters in a while. They don't return my phone calls. I only found out about one of them being in a serious relationship when he mentioned it. It felt unreal when it happened. Seeing him sign the papers caused a lot of pain in my chest. When he removed his ring and placed it on the paper, I felt a lump in my throat. After he left, it hit me that I had never apologized to him. I held the pen and stared at the ring, realizing how much I messed up. I ruined my marriage, my relationship with my children, and I think I was in an abusive relationship. I just cried, struggling to breathe and feeling too overwhelmed. But eventually, I signed the papers. A week after my divorce, my lover hit me for the first time. I was telling him about my day, and I accidentally bumped into the nightstand, knocking over his phone. He gave me a harsh look, slapped me, and called me clumsy. I called my ex-husband, and the first thing he asked was, "Does he harm my children?" I reassured him that he didn't, and he hung up without saying more. I cried intensely that night. Soon my lover became comfortable using physical force. This continued for 2 months, and at the time I felt like I deserved it. My ex-husband never laid a hand on me, but my lover did, and I saw it as a form of karma. The mistreatment only ended when he struck one of my daughters who had returned from college due to COVID-19. She was the only one who chose to stay at the house. My 2 older children stood by their dad's side. After one call from her, my ex entered the house and offered my lover a chance to hit him before beating him brutally. My ex had a stone-cold expression throughout, showing no emotions. I had to plead with him to stop. He looked at our daughter's bruised face and asked which hand my lover had used to hit her. He then broke my lover's right hand by stomping on it. When everything was done, my ex took him outside and dragged him away, not once acknowledging me. He brought him to the hospital and told the ER that my lover fell downstairs. My husband stood by my lover's side, and though I don't know what they talked about, the next day my lover quit his job and left me. I continued working, while my ex began getting involved with some of my single friends, including a few coworkers. One of them was the girl who encouraged me to cheat. I only found out later, when my coworker was upset over him, bragging to others about how he had been with her intimately. She kept asking me about him and why he wasn't returning her calls. It hurt to realize he was doing that, and I suspect it was intentional. I went on dates with a few guys, but those relationships didn't last. Being a single mother of 5 seemed to drive men away. Then there was the aspect of intimacy. Looking back, even with my lover, none of them could satisfy me the way my ex could. It made me question why I allowed all this to happen. I used to be happy. So how did I let myself become manipulated? I still don't understand why. During this time, my house was always quiet. My boys were either in their room or at their dad's place. Except for my third daughter, my other daughters chose not to talk to me, and it was painful. My ex noticed this and held a family meeting. He gathered all the kids at home, and I was glad to have our children together, but most of them didn't want to be there. He started telling the kids to talk to me, and my youngest child used hurtful words towards me. This surprised and deeply hurt me, and my ex immediately intervened by disciplining him in front of me. "Have I ever used that word for your mother?" he said firmly, and our son shook his head. "Your mother takes care of you, loves you, and you will show her respect. What happened between us is not your concern. All of you need to begin respecting your mother. Is that clear?" He looked at all of our children, and his expression conveyed a lot. As a result, my relationship with my children began to improve. During the second anniversary of our divorce, we managed to be civil. We laughed, talked. He frequently visited to fix things and discuss the kids. For a while, I felt like I had my husband back, and I leaned in, but he pushed me away and said no before leaving. A month later, he started dating our youngest child's teacher. She's 10 years younger than him, and they share many interests. She's very attractive, and I tried to be polite while they were dating, even though it hurt to see him looking at her the way he used to look at me. How he touched her, made her laugh. She became the center of his attention, and I finally understood why people envied us, why they kept telling me how lucky I was. That level of devotion, why hadn't I noticed it before? I had a nervous breakdown when I found out they were going to have a baby and get married. I woke up next to him, tears in my eyes, begging for forgiveness and acknowledging the damage I caused to our family. He stayed silent, holding me as I spoke. He visited me daily, only leaving my side to talk to his fiancée, who also checked up on me. I don't feel deserving of their sympathy. She showed me kindness and even found a therapist for me, which they paid for. My therapist was direct. She said I was experiencing a midlife crisis, and instead of talking to my husband, I allowed these young women to manipulate me. She explained that they aimed to ruin my marriage because they were single and possibly resentful about not getting married. They saw me as an easy target. Misery seeks company, and the fact that the main instigator had an affair with my ex-husband proved it. After several months of therapy, she noticed I was still struggling and suggested I share my feelings on Reddit. Create an anonymous account and let your emotions out. It can be therapeutic and an alternative to group therapy. My ex's new wife is kind. She frequently checks on me, talks to me, and ensures I'm okay. Even though I want to feel resentment, I can't, because she's genuinely nice and their twin boys are adorable. My ex also comes by to make sure I'm all right, asking if I've been eating. He assures me that despite our past, I'll always be the mother of his children, and he'll be there as a friend. Last Saturday, he even came over, let me rest, cleaned the house, and prepared breakfast. That moment made me break down and cry. I deeply miss him. I miss my husband, my best friend. Even now, I can't comprehend how I was manipulated so easily. Despite my kids being around, we're not as close as before, but they're here, yet the one person I yearn for the most isn't here. He's moved on, and it's my fault. One day I'll move forward in life, but for now, I believe I deserve this pain. I deserve it all. Update. I had a conversation with someone through messages and I wanted to clarify things. I wanted to discuss what my ex went through, but I felt it wasn't my place to talk about his pain. I made numerous attempts to make things right, but he didn't want anything to do with me. The situation was complicated by the fact that the person I was involved with didn't want to leave me alone, regardless of what I did. I felt trapped. During the affair, I was in a strange fog. It's difficult to explain, almost like an out-of-body experience. The last day of the affair was meant to be final, but it left a lasting impact on me. I recalled how I pleaded with my ex to give me another chance, just days after he found out. He simply looked at me and walked away. He only spoke to me 3 times after that. During the civil moment of signing the divorce papers, when I reached out after my partner mistreated me, and the day after he confronted my partner almost violently. That day he finally let out all his pent-up emotions. As I mentioned earlier, he tends to let things build up until he explodes. He shouted at me because of my foolish choices, how I wrecked him. He explained that he can't afford to grieve our marriage because he has to stay strong for the kids. I couldn't help but cry because I had broken this man. A strong man who would have done anything for me if I'd asked. I said sorry, but he didn't want to hear it. He assured me my AP wouldn't bother me again, and then he left. It took a whole year before we could talk normally. Before that, he wanted nothing to do with me. He started getting involved with some of the women I knew, and I let him be. I understood why he did it and thought it was justified. After that family meeting, he began acting more civil for the sake of the kids. During that time, I truly understood the extent of what I had destroyed. After the family meeting, my kids slowly started talking to me again. My youngest took the longest, but I made an effort. I really tried to mend things with my children. They were my main focus. As they noticed my attempts, they began to open up gradually, though not completely. During that second year, I would see my kids laughing at home while my ex-husband joked around or helped with chores. He'd cook on the grill and dance with the girls. I believed that if I showed how truly sorry I was and made an effort, I could win him back. I did everything possible. Suggested couples counseling, starting anew, wearing outfits he liked, his favorite perfume, styling my hair the way he preferred. But he just ignored me. That's why I tried to kiss him that day. I thought there was a chance, but he stopped me. I cried, I begged, but he simply stared at me. He explained he couldn't be with me because I shattered him. He'd never kiss me after I'd been with another man. He'd never hold me after another man had touched me. He'd never be intimate with me because I allowed another man to share my bed. When I mentioned the women he'd been with post-divorce, he clarified that it was after our marriage ended. What I did happen during our marriage. Your body and heart belong to me, just as mine belong to you, and you destroyed that, he told me. I'm attempting to maintain a friendship with him, but it's difficult. I was married to this man for over 20 years, and I ruined it in 6 months. And for what? A midlife crisis? My desperate need for female friends? An urge to fit in? Looking back, I don't recognize that person. Everything I did was out of character for me. My third child understood, and without her support, I might have considered ending my life. She kept me grounded and safe. I had no clue she was home that day. Typically, the maltreatment would happen when the kids were away or during our commutes. I always dreaded their departure. Yet, I allowed him to treat me that way because I felt I deserved it. On that particular night, I stood up for myself. I asked him to leave, and he strongly disagreed. When he hit me and pushed me against the wall, my daughter suddenly appeared and jumped on his back after he hit me again. He threw her off and struck her. I hit him and fled into the garage with my little girl. He pounded on the door and she called her father. He nearly broke through the garage door. But my ex-husband arrived just in time, and I had to prevent a fight, as my ex was ready to confront him violently. His new wife has been a blessing for him, giving him the chance to love and be himself once more. I didn't intend to be part of his new life, but she insisted. She had experienced an abusive relationship before meeting my husband. She aimed to avoid any conflicts, and she made it clear that she can be tough if I cross a line. My kids really like her. After all, she taught most of them English. Still, I'm often consumed by intense guilt that paralyzes me. I'm still working at the same company and eventually became a manager, and I fired those women. Since I knew their secrets, removing them wasn't a problem. I simply miss what I once had, that's all.